Hi everyone, good evening. This is yet another session on PAD 742 Development Theories and Administration. In today's lectures, we will be looking at modernization and underdevelopment and what those terms connote beyond being just theories in themselves. Well, if you remember before now, in our previous classes, we discussed in-depthly on these various concepts from a theoretical perspective, giving scholarly views and opinions on what they entails and how they guide an understanding of what is obtainable in various environments across the globe. We started by looking at what is obtainable in the socialist world, and then from there we moved to a comparative analysis of what takes place in the Western capitalist world. And then we looked at the third world countries in themselves. And in all, we looked at various theories that tend to explain the extent to which development is pursued and sustained within these environments, and the relevance of theoretical underpinnings in the explanation as to how these various theories exist and how they have laid pattern procedural steps on the actualization of development from various perspectives. And in the course of that, we talked on modernization theory explicitly, and we looked at various theories that explain modernization and the extent, the central argument to which they proffer by stating clearly that various countries must follow, or traditional countries or that developed countries that exhibit traditional values must follow certain procedures to attain development. And we also looked at other angles that talked about how the central government in themselves contribute, or all every citizens of a country contribute to a central post, and from the central post they receive what is necessary for them and what guides their welfare. And then we now looked at the third variable from an underdevelopment and dependency theory angle, where they said that the activities of the Western world or the Western capitalist world, the incursion of capitalism into this less developed society propagates underdevelopment, and to a large extent explains why these countries are underdeveloped. We also looked at the angle of the argument that says that due to the exploitative activities and tendencies and the expansionist ideas that revolves around the notion of capitalism, and the fact that it is guided by the forces of demand and supply and the maxim of minimum input for maximum output, there is the tendency to expand to new environments, and the conquest agenda that is embedded in the system tends to subject the new territories to some exploitative tendencies. And we talked on the issues of slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and neocolonialism, and even globalization as all attributes that tends to propagate underdevelopment in the less developed countries. So in today's lecture, we shall be looking at two variables. But even before now, remember we defined development from different perspectives. We gave different views of modernization school of thought, different theories and scholars that subscribe to the opinion that for less developed countries to make progress, they must follow certain patterns. And we made mention of the views of Adam Smith, the views of W.W. Rostow, and his stages of development. And we even made mention of the growth theory that talks about improvement in the economy and a reduced expenditure on the welfare of the people, as increase in the economy is tantamount to development. And we now looked at the development theories. We made mentions of the views of Claude Ake. We made mentions of the views of Walter Rodney, Andre Gunther Frank, and a host of them that have talked on the development as being a resultant effect or a consequence of development in the advanced countries. And we said that there are two sides of the same coin. That why it brings development on one hand, it projects on the development on the other. Our emphasis would be on modernization and underdevelopment, and how these concepts derive their various meaning beyond the theoretical postulations that we gave earlier on. And we said that, before I go into that, let me share my screen with you so that you have an idea of what we will be doing today. So we said that modernization and underdevelopment. Some writers define modernization in terms of changing institutions. Others stress changes in individual attitudes. Still others emphasize group attitudes. Frequently, modernization has been equated with the attitudes and institutions of capitalist Western countries. So this is in line with the earlier statement that modernization reflects capitalism in itself. And beyond being a theory that tends to explain how development can be attained by following certain values and doing away with traditional values that are impediments to development, within the confines of it being a concept within this discussion, if you look at these various categorizations now and what scholars have said, some look at it as changes in individual attitudes. Some emphasize group attitudes. Others look at it that modernization is a frequent, okay, I have somebody online, Omoto Show, welcome online. So it means different things to different people, but the central point there is that it tends to explain a progressive or a procedural change that takes place either within the confines of the economy or from the individual perspective or even from group behavior. And in it all, it tends to guide an understanding of progresses that can be made from all spheres. And like I said earlier on, beyond it being a theory that explains development, it can be looked at from the angle of being a concept. And from being a concept, it means different things to different people. So modernization has been equated with the attitudes and institutions of capitalist Western countries. A strong personal work ethic, individual entrepreneurship, materialism, optimism, and a group structure encourages these attitudes and institutions. So in it all, from the angle of the fact that it means different things to different people, it can be conceptualized within this checklist that have been dropped now, from the angle of an individual entrepreneurship attitude, from the angle of materialism and optimism, from the angle of emphasizing group behavior and group attitude. However it is looked at, it simply connotes a progressive change from a lower standard to a higher consideration. There is a growing dissatisfaction, however, with ethnocentric definitions and broader definitions of modernizations have been sought which could encompass all societies. Nash views modernization as the process of transformation towards the establishment and institutionalization of modernity. And by modernity, it means the social, cultural, and psychological framework which facilitates application of tested knowledge to all phases and branches of productions. So what this statement is trying to say is that however one looks at it, both from the angle of the economy to the levels of the individuals and group behavior, it simply connotes an improvement in values. And that is why, from the views of Nash, is the process of transformation towards the establishment and institutionalization of modernity. And by modernity, he means social, cultural, and psychological framework, which facilitates the application of tested knowledge to all phases and branches of production. A similar view is that of Moore, who refers to modernization as the rationalization of social behavior and social organization. So if you look at these scholarly postulations, it simply talks about increment from existing standards to higher levels. So both definitions emphasize modernization is a process of becoming modern or process of social change. While the areas in which rationalization takes place are essentially the same for all societies, Moore lists the areas as follows: modernization and commercialization. So his own idea of modernization as a concept reflects monetization and commercialization, which if we go into the crux of political economy, monetization it tends to be understood from the angle of injecting money as a value or as a means of exchange within an economic system. Commercialization reflects trade. So in other words, modernization also reflects improvement in the exchange of goods and services within an economy. He also looked at it from the angle of technification of production and distribution, demographic rationalization, looks at it from the angle of education, bureaucratization, and secularization. So in his own perspective, it covers the whole gamut of how society functions, from the angle of trade, from the angle of improved technology and production, from the angle of even population and the environment that the population occupies, the extent of the education, and how the hierarchical structure of how information flows within the system as well are also looked at or understood within the confines of modernization. And secularization, bringing in the aspect of religion and the freedom that exists within them as well as all elements and attributes of modernization. So the study by Hanks and Smith is an interesting attempt to define modernization as a syndrome of individual attitudes that could be expected to be common to all societies. Specifically, the authors propose to classify as modern those personal qualities which are likely to be inculcated by participation in large-scale modern productive enterprises, such as the factory, and perhaps more crucial, which may be required of the workers and the staff if the factory is to operate efficiently and effectively. So this is also looking at it from the angle of the activities that takes place within an economy to reflect the idea of modernization. That the interpersonal relationship that takes place also can be looked at as the extent of modernization within the society. From the angle of production and large-scale participation in enterprises and organizations reflects the extent to which a society can be termed a modern society. So it is not only from the individual angle, there's also the economic dimension to it, but in it all, it reflects progressive change or procedural increment that takes place within the confines of an economy. So Smith began by identifying 14 personal attributes of modernization, including openness to new experiences, efficacy, understanding of productive processes, placing a high value on technical skills, and acceptance of skills as a valid base for distributing rewards. So in the views of these scholars as well, there are 14 points or checklists that one can measure what modernization entails. And he talked about it from the angle of openness to new experiences, from the issues of understanding of productive processes, placing a high value on technical skill, and a host of other variables that one can look at and measure development within those parameters. In addition, they look at modernization from a topical perspective, e.g. attitudes towards family, family size, religion, politics, consumption. So if you look at what this is saying, it still goes back to talk about the views that mentioned the secularization, bureaucratization, demographic rationalization, and all that as attributes of modernization. So it is in furtherance of these ideas that one can say that modernization reflects these whole parameters that have been mentioned earlier on. He also talked about a behavioral perspective, which involves psychological testing and interviews to determine political and religious belief and other activities. Finally, a fourth perspective was obtained by devising several modernity skills, combining elements of the other perspectives. So in his views, modernization is also employed by some other authors to refer to the process by which a traditional society is undergoing transformation and becoming modern. You know, in one of our classes, this particular point was buttressed using W.W. Rosto's stages of development. For him, for an underdeveloped society to make progress, they must follow 5 processes which he mentioned. And I think, if I remember correctly, he made mention of traditional approach, a traditional society, getting to the period of precondition to take off, and then there's the takeoff stage, which is the 3rd stage, and then there's the drive to maturity, which is the 4th stage, and then the stage of mass consumption. And he explained them from various angles and understanding. So what this point is equally saying is that societies must undergo certain levels of transformation to become a modern society. So modernization as a theory lays step-by-step understanding of what people or societies must undergo to attain these levels of increment and these levels of advancement that is required to measure the extent of development in every society. So having said that, and in tandem with what our topic of today is about, we will now look at the angle of underdevelopment. So that way you will understand what the two terms connote and how one tends to measure development and the other tends to give certain procedural patterns that must be followed to attain development. So we say here that ordinarily the term underdevelopment refers to a situation where the economic, social, and political conditions of a nation are at their rudimentary stage of development. Using the major indicators of development, these nations are backward. And what are the major indications of development? In one of the classes, we talked about life expectancy. We talked about the views of Dudley Sears, where he said what is happening to poverty, what is happening to unemployment, and what is happening to welfare, unemployment, and even shelter. So if those things are available in a society, such a society can be adjudged to be developed. But in the aspects where they are lacking, it means that development reigns in such a society. So when one looks at the indicators of development and they are lacking in any nation, such a nation is considered to be backward and can be termed underdevelopment. Why from the angle of modernization, those things are already present. Those countries that are considered under the categorization of being modern societies have done extensively in terms of a progressive aspect in measuring levels of poverty. They have gone beyond what one would consider as people living under the poverty line. There's shelter for everybody. There's employment for almost everybody. But in underdeveloped societies, these are lacking or in gross demand. Thus, these nations lack key development facilities, including the following: efficient and effective transportation network, communication system, and other infrastructural facilities such as power, water supply, and housing. Other indicators of underdevelopment include poor education, poor health, and generally low standard of living. This traditional approach to the description of underdevelopment has been found to be very limited, as it does not explain the causes of underdevelopment, nor is it capable of providing prescription for underdevelopment. Remember in the last class as well, or in one of the classes before the last, we talked on the argument by underdevelopment and dependency theorists that holds colonialism, slavery, imperialism, and other attributes that are the causes or the root causes of underdevelopment. So within this very conceptual analysis now, there's the argument that they do not entirely reflect what development is about or how underdevelopment is perpetuated. Rather, they tend to just give a cosmetic approach to the understanding of underdevelopment. So one is saying, therefore, that for a better understanding of underdevelopment, there must be adequate knowledge and guidance of what breeds underdevelopment. In reaction to this limitation, radical students of development, such as Gonda Frank, argue that it is capitalism, both world and national, which produced underdevelopment in the past and which still generates underdevelopment in the present. So from his own perspective, from the perspective of Gonda Frank, he holds capitalism and its factors, attendant factors, as the consequences for underdevelopment of underdeveloped societies. So it goes from, that is the contradistinction to the views of modernization that talks about doing away with certain traditional values that are inimical to development. So if you look at it very well now, there are schools of thought that one talks about the traditional values that are practiced in various societies to be the root cause of underdevelopment, why there are views that holds capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism as the root causes of underdevelopment. So let us look at another description by Rodney. According to him, underdevelopment is not absence of development, because every people have developed in one way or another, and to a greater or lesser extent. It makes sense only as a way of comparing levels of development. So if you look at this statement by Walter Rodney, to him, development can be measured from different angles, but it will only make sense to understand underdevelopment when you compare levels of development. For instance, when you compare the levels of welfare or per capita income of, say, maybe Nigeria with USA, you'll be able to understand effectively what the notion of development and underdevelopment is about, because the one for America will definitely be higher than the one here. So for him, until you compare levels of development, you will not be able to understand what underdevelopment is about, because people develop in various areas. So underdevelopment is very much tied to the fact that human social development has been uneven. And from a strictly economic viewpoint, some human groups have advanced further by producing more and becoming healthier. To Rodney, underdevelopment expresses the relationship of exploitation, namely the exploitation of one country by another. So if you read his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, you would see that he talked about the expansionist tendencies of capitalism to be the root cause of underdevelopment of third world societies. To him, because of this expansionism, they tend to exploit the resources of the new environments they go into. Like talking about agriculture, that was used as an example in his work. People of underdeveloped environments were made to focus on the production of cash crops and crops that are needed in the advanced countries, as against providing food crops. So you have a situation where you can produce what is needed abroad, but cannot meet your food requirement. So for him, it's because of the countries, the underdeveloped countries, serving the interests of the advanced countries, that they are underdeveloped. They have sought not to pay attention to their own conditions due to the economic situations that they are faced with, and they now produce what is needed abroad to the detriment of their own environment. So all those are contained in his work, and it is in his own perspective of underdevelopment. So we say here that underdevelopment can be defined in many ways: by the incidence of poverty, ignorance or diseases, maldistribution of the national income, administrative incompetence, and social disorganization. So if you want to actually look at an in-depth measurement of what underdevelopment connotes within the confines of our course, you would be measuring it even from the angle of administrative incompetence and social disorganization and a host of other factors. So there is thus not a single definition which is so comprehensive as to incorporate all the features of an underdeveloped country. Kuznets therefore suggests three definitions of underdevelopment. To him, it may mean failure to utilize fully the productive potential warranted by the existing state of technical knowledge, a failure resulting from the resistance of social institutions. Secondly, it may mean backwardness in economic performance compared with the few economically leading countries of the world. Remember, from Rodney's view, he said it will only make sense by comparing levels of development. So that is what this second point is also talking about, that it may mean backwardness in economic performance compared with the few economically leading countries of the period. Third, it may mean economic poverty in the sense of failure to assure adequate subsistence and material comfort to most of the country's population. We used agriculture as an example earlier on, where we said that this underdeveloped society now focus their attention on producing the crops that are needed or the products that are needed by these advanced countries to the detriment of their own comfort and their own material well-being and the needs of their own society by serving the interests of the advanced countries. So to a large extent, that tends to propagate and promote underdevelopment. Having said all that, it is worthy of note that there are some related concepts such as development, growth, modernization, and underdevelopment. Though apparently similar, they are the same. In this unit, we have attempted to explain them for the proper understanding of development administration. So in other words, if you look at what we have discussed so far, you would be able to understand adequately the whole idea of development. We talked about growth and growth theory in itself. We have looked at modernization and underdevelopment. However, there are other aspects that tend to reflect or give an in-depth analysis of what we have discussed so far. And here we are now saying the theory of modernization in development administration. Remember, we have looked at it from an economic angle, which is very holistic. But now it is being narrowed to issues of development administration as it concerns this course. And we say that the term development, growth, underdevelopment, modernization, etc., are used in development administration to describe the stages of progress which a country experiences. However, this perspective is akin to the views of classical scholars who prescribe a streamlined pattern of growth and development and hold the internal rubrics of less developed countries to be antithetical to development and modernization. This is a reflection of the whole argument of modernization, that underdeveloped countries are the way they are because they have internal challenges or factors or internal values that does not promote development. In other words, the values, the nature and character of their society tend to serve as an impediment to development, or they inhibit development in themselves. And for them to make development, to attain development, they must do away with these values that tend to retard the extent of development. That is the angle from the modernization school of thought. And when that is related to development administration, it therefore means that third world countries or less developed countries have internal challenges that tend to hamper the extent of development that they should attain. And for there to be any meaningful development in terms of administration as well, they must do away with these values. This unit therefore attempts to explore the meaning of modernization within the context of development administration. Having said that, with the meaning of modernization, some writers define modernization in terms of changing institutions, others stress changes in individual attitudes, others still emphasize group attitudes. Frequently, modernization has been equated with the attitudes and institutions of capitalist Western countries. A strong personal work ethic, individual entrepreneurship, and so many other variables that have been mentioned. So, having said that, and in line with our making mention of secularization and demographic rationalization and education, and the 14 variables that we mentioned earlier that connotes the extent to which modernization can be measured, one can easily say that a developed society is where the whole trappings of development have been attained. And an underdeveloped society is where there is the yearnings of the people for certain levels of advancement that can reflect the desires of their societies. So in all this, looking still at the views of Ingalls and Smith, they conclude that modern man's character may be summed up under 4 major headings. He is an informed participant citizen. He has a marked sense of personal efficacy. He is highly independent and autonomous in his relation to traditional sources of influences, especially when he is making decisions based on how to conduct his personal affairs, and he is ready for new experiences and ideas. That is, he is relatively open-minded and cognitively flexible. So for him, if you reduce the aspect of development to the individual perspective, it therefore means that somebody that has attained development within the confines of developed society tends to reflect these attributes that he has mentioned. He said that such a person is an informed participant citizen. He has a marked sense of personal efficacy. He is highly independent and autonomous in his relation to traditional sources of influences, especially when he is making decisions based on how to conduct his personal affairs, and he's ready for new experiences and ideas. But these values that he said are found within the individuals of a developed society are grossly lacking in the underdeveloped societies. For instance, what is the extent of how informed our citizens are in this part of the world? Or what is the sense of judgment that we put in place when faced with certain conditions? Or how well do we even relate with the society and with individuals within the society? How well do we even worship? So all this can be measured to either connote development or underdevelopment. And in administrative terms as well, how organizations function in this climate differs from how it is in more advanced countries. So all these are attributes that one can tend to measure the extent of development side by side levels of underdevelopment. The term modernization is also employed by some authors to refer to the process by which a traditional society undergoes transformation and becomes modern. Other authors use the term to describe the process by which traditional society becomes Western or acquire the character of the technologically advanced countries. Thus, a modern society or a modernized society is one that is highly educated and technologized. So what this is saying is that from the views of various perspectives or various scholars, the extent to which an underdeveloped society makes progress across the list that is handed down to measure the extent of development matters. So for an underdeveloped society to make effort towards development from the theoretical angle of modernization, it therefore means westernization. It therefore means how they can acquire advanced knowledge on how to tap into their environment and become productive in the interest of all and sundry. So in the views of these scholars, a modern society, or modern society, is one that is highly educated, one which technology has improved, one which the standard of living has improved, one which there is no poverty, and the extent of the standard of living of people and even per capita income is at its highest levels. So where those are found to be lacking, it is safe for one to conclude that such a society is an underdeveloped society. So having said that, in summary, we said modernization is one of the basic concepts in development administration used to describe those stages of progress which a country experiences. During the course of the discussion, it was variously defined using the views of some writers. However, the term modernization has also been employed by some authors to refer to modernity. Other authors use the term to describe the process by which traditional societies become more Western or acquire the characteristics of the technologically advanced countries. Thus, a modern society or modernized society is one that is highly educated and advanced technologically. So having said that, it is easy for one to sum up the argument by saying that underdevelopment connotes a society where technology is low, standard of living is poor, a level of infrastructure is almost absent, the levels of education is still at its lowest ebb, while modernization or modernized society, or where it is considered to be an advanced society, there's a high standard of living, there's effective a system that works in the interest of all and sundry, ranging from the health sector to private life and all. And then from the angle of the fact that there's a reduced level of poverty, reduced level of unemployment, and then the literacy level is very high. So it is easy for one to understand the dichotomy that exists, or the differentials between what development is all about, or modernization is all about, and what underdevelopment and dependency reflects. So having said that, there are some self-assessment questions and answers that have been provided, and we said that modernization has been equated with attitudes and institutions of capitalist Western countries, a strong personal work ethic, individual entrepreneurship, materialism, optimism, and a group structure encouraging these attitudes and institutions. There is a growing dissatisfaction, however, with ethnocentrism. The broader definition of modernization have been sought, which could encompass community as well as capitalist institutions. And then question 2, there are various writers on development, particularly those of Western origins. However, for the purpose of this exercise, Nash, Moore's, Increase, and Smith's view would suffice. And we have discussed their views earlier on, ranging from the checklist that they handed down to measure development, from the individual aspect to the societal aspect, and the works of Smith that also talks on the secularization and the extent to which individuals within the society familiarize themselves with the system and are free to make informed decisions, and all that cumulatively can either promote development or showcase the extent of the development of such a society. So having said that, there are a list of books here that one can read and then develop more ideas on what modernization, development, and underdevelopment connotes. So with that, we have come to the end of the class, and we would open the floor for questioning. I think we have up to 6 participants, and you can unmute yourself and make your contributions and ask questions as you wish. So I have Indifreke, I have Lovett, I have Okeke, Florence, I have Victoria, Olubukola, Omoto Folake. So whoever has a question to ask or a contribution to make, so this is the time for that. Can anyone hear me? Please, you can unmute yourself.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
All right. So any question or any aspect that you expect that would make further enlightenment on? Okay, Omoto Shafolaki, I think you can ask your question if you have any, or make your contribution. Are you there?
Yes, sir. The class was quite fast. I was wondering, is it possible to get this material, sir?
Yes, of course. The recordings are always posted on the site. I don't know but we make it available for students to listen to and then read on their own at their convenient time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Who else has something to say? You can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Or make your contributions, or give your own understanding of the concepts that we have discussed so far, ranging from modernization, dependency, underdevelopment, how they relate to administration as well. So whatever you have to say that would enrich the lecture so far is welcome at this point. So your silence, should I take your silence as a perfect understanding of what we have discussed? Okay, like I said earlier on in the very first class, if you have a WhatsApp group in your class, kindly add me up. That way you can read on your own and then ask your questions on the platform. I think it's easier that way. It works better that way, so that you have enough time to reflect on what we have discussed and then bring up your questions in the group. The classes before now all have their WhatsApp groups. I don't know if your class has. If you do, you can add me up.
So we don't have. So we can choose an admin now. We don't have.
Well, that's quite surprising. I think this should be a master's class, right?
No, it's PGD.
PGD, okay. Anybody can volunteer to create a WhatsApp group, because each time emails are sent out, we come and then we hardly see people online. In fact, I think this is about the largest class we have had, out of close to 300 students or more. And every day before these lectures, we send out emails and we hardly find anybody online. So if you can, amongst yourself online now, pick somebody to create a WhatsApp group, reach out to other students and then add them up in the group. It will help to guide a more understanding of what the topic is about. So I think you people should consider that. So among the list of persons here, do we have any volunteer? Because there are so many things to be discussed, so many things to cover in the course of this work, and then we're only allowed to have 8 sessions. So it is always through the WhatsApp platforms that people ask their questions and then make their contributions, and others can learn from them as well. So it is not enough for the lecturer to speak and then nobody's asking questions or making contributions. Your contributions would help enrich our knowledge of what we are discussing. Some of you can even go and read on your own and then come up with questions, and we'll have all that discussed. So please think about it and then create a WhatsApp group. Maybe in the next class, we'll have more persons online. So my phone number is 080, my WhatsApp line, 36113243. I'll take it again. 08036113243. So having said all that, then we have come to the end of the class, and then we hope to meet again next week, Thursday, same time. Inform other members of the class, please.
Please, sir, can you take the number again?
080 36
Okay.
11 3243.
Okay, sir.
All right, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening.